Welcome everyone to the first episode in a vodcast series, Living the Clean, where we aim to discuss all of the latest innovations, trends and things going on in the facilities management and workplace arena. I'm today's host, James Bradley, CEO of the Churchill Group, and I'm delighted to be sitting here joined by David and David.
I'm David Emanuel, the founder and managing director of ifm.net.
And hi folks, I'm David Gérouville-Farrell. I'm an AI consultant.
Brilliant, thank you. And David, you've just given away the topic of today. We're here to talk about all things AI in the workplace and the facilities management arena. Let's jump straight into the debate today and talk about, obviously 2024 has been a big year for AI. I think if I had £1 for every time someone mentioned, are you using AI or you should be using AI, I'd probably be fairly well off by now. So without doubt, big year for AI. And I think 2025 is looking like it's perhaps going to be building on that momentum. So if I may start by asking you both in turn, what's the sort of the biggest standout thing for you in AI from 2024?
Wow. Where to begin? 2024. I mean, I think 2024 was the year where you started to see a little bit of it actually making the impact that people thought it was going to have. It's only the early days still, but like 2023, everyone's playing with it like a toy. And over 2024, you started to see AI appearing inside all of the things. So, and as of now, it's inside your email, it's inside your Word documents, it's inside your spreadsheets, it's inside your search engines. It's starting to actually make its way into the wider world, as in it's proving to be real, basically. I think that's the thing I got from 24.
Brilliant. Thank you, David.
Well, I'm not going to answer your question direct. I'm going to say 2025 because the other week, DeepSeek just changed and turned technology upside down on its head, out of nowhere. And NVIDIA, which is a company that you may or may not have heard of, they make chips, they lost $600 billion off of their share price, 17% wiped out overnight, unprecedented. That was the biggest standout thing for me.
Yeah, no, absolutely. A big game changer in the world of AI. So just to get down to some of the specifics then. So in terms of a practical application you've seen recently that you think's really quite clever or quite cool or useful, have you got one that comes to mind, both of you?
I mean, I find it useful in every part of what I do. So I'm maybe a bad person to talk to because it's not one standing out. My entire world is now filled with little bits of AI helping me in little places. The most recent thing, though, that blew my socks off, just a couple of days ago, OpenAI released a new product called Deep Research, and you ask it to do some research job for you. Could you please investigate this topic under this domain? It'll ask some clarifying questions, and then it disappears for like 10 minutes, half an hour, however long it takes, and it comes back with this ginormous, incredibly well-researched report. And it's not a gimmick, it's easy enough to do a gimmick version of this, do a bunch of searches, get a bunch of pages back, summarize them, boom, there's your report. But I've read a few of the reports of the OpenAI tool, and they're actually really, really good. They're well researched. It's like burrowing down little avenues, trying to solve problems. It's taking an angle on something. It's not just summarizing, it's like synthesizing perspectives on things. And today I heard an interview with a scientist talking about an example of him using it in his actual research practice. And I think that is like the sign of things to come. Like the quality bar is going to get higher and higher and higher.
Yeah. And just to jump into that then, so if you had been the person that was building those reports and doing that research historically, should you be worried about AI doing that? Should you be excited about how you're going to work with it? What's your take on how that will work? Because clearly there's a big human factor to AI that we can, I'm sure, discuss today.
I mean, that is a question that is like more than a podcast length on its own. How is it going to impact the jobs of people? It's not going to take all the jobs away. It's going to change the way we do things. So, I'm a technical person. I sometimes, depending on what I'm doing, write software. And it's not replacing me. It's making me more powerful. So if I'm somebody who writes research reports, I now have an intern, an AI intern, who works for me, who's probably better than me, who can create for me 10 reports that I can then use to provide me the information I need to do my job. That's one way it can go. There's lots of ways it can go. I don't think it's not a threat, But I think it's also not only a threat. I think it's something else. It's going to change everything. It's hard to predict how it's going to change things.
Yeah, it's a really interesting topic. I mean, from my point of view, I think that inherently, take the research paper, for example. Why are we doing a research paper? We're doing a research paper to learn more, to continue to hypothesize, to invent something, discover something, make something better. And actually, we're doing that for the human race or the planet or whatever we're doing it for. So I think there's going to be this natural evolution as we start to work how we get the best of AI and how it actually enhances the product that we're trying to create or affect in the first place. But yeah, really interesting. And David?
Well, I don't think anything should be standalone in terms of AI at the moment. I know that normally when radiologists or doctors are looking at radiology, there's two of them to review something. Now they can replace one with AI. It's much quicker, but they still need that human interface to check. So I think it's about a symbiotic relationship between man and AI, rather than just saying, let's do AI on its own. But one of the apps that I've been using quite a lot of, because we do 4 or 5 news stories a day, finding images to back that up, AI is now creating the images that we want to use. It's not always perfect. Limbs are sometimes put in the wrong places, but it's not bad.
Yeah. No, fascinating. And again, I think for me, it's about how we as humans, I guess, learn to interact with it. So on that basis, if either of you come up with anything that perhaps has helped yourselves or you've heard discussed that is advice for anyone that might be listening, thinking, I really like the sound of this, but actually, how do I best prepare to use AI? You got any views, David?
You have to start playing with it. And I would say play with it any way you can get your hands on it. So there are free apps. You can go to various websites. You can use ChatGPT for free. You can use DeepSeek for free. You can use lots of these things for free. You can use some of the image models for free. I think the way to figure out how it's going to help you is to play with it and to build up a kind of instinct about what it's good at, what it's bad at, and what way does it help you. It's going to be a wee bit different for most people, compared to each other, because everyone's got a different sort of thing that they will find useful. My mum used it recently to find the name of a Pink Floyd song she couldn't remember. So she couldn't remember the name of the song. She remembered the vibe of the song. So she gets on ChatGPT and she starts telling it about the song. It's kind of like this. It's got a kind of vibe like that. It's like blues, but it's sexy, and next thing she knows, it's told her the name of the song. Now, that's random as anything, right? That's not necessarily what you were thinking of when you thought of what's useful. But I think that's so cool, right? She was going to just be stuck thinking about that for ages otherwise, So I say the best way to get you to figure out what it's good at for you is to start playing with it. And I think there's no substitute for that. I mean, there's lots of actual concrete things I could share about how I use it, but everyone's going to have a different need. So just throw yourself at it and see what happens.
And is there anything that either you think we should be mindful of when we are having a play with it, trying to make it solve real world issues or enhance something that we're doing? Is there anything you think we have to be mindful of in terms of, we hear a lot, don't we, in the news around safety and data privacy and things like that? Are there any sort of big do's and don'ts either of you have come across that we should all be mindful of?
I think bias. So it's sucking up all the information that's out there.
Yeah.
And some of that information is misinformation, some of it's disinformation, and some of it's just wrong.
Yeah.
And I think that AI doesn't necessarily know the difference. So AI doesn't have what we have, which is a sort of a moral compass or a bit of common sense. Well, not everybody has common sense, but that's what's got to be applied. I think the human part of it is you have to apply some common sense to it and verify and check, because it's not always right. I mean, there have been a few examples where it's got things completely wrong.
Yeah. And is that a little bit like the good old analogy when you're speaking to someone in the facilities management space? And as we know, we've been in an industry that's created a lot of data for a long, long time, perhaps going back a long way. It was very hard to get our hands on it. I think these days it's quite easy to get your hands on data. And I think perhaps one of the traps that we can all fall into as an industry is building an amazing dashboard with lots of data in it, but not stepping back with that common sense lens and going, either what's it telling us? Do we think it's correct? Or probably most importantly, what are we going to do with that data to actually go and make that add value to whatever the situation that we're in? So perhaps there's some similarities there with the use of AI.
I agree. I think the scariest thing for me in terms of FM is getting AI to write a tender proposal and then the client using AI to evaluate it. Where's the human intervention? You're just taking humans out, and FM's a people business. Yeah. So I kind of think, yes, that's where you got to be a bit cautious of.
So is it fair to say then, hopefully not too controversially, that AI isn't there to make us lazy? Actually, AI is there to enhance what we're doing and continue to drive forwards the products and the propositions or the tenders or the scoring of tenders. It's really there to help us, but not avoid us from putting 100% effort in as well.
Yeah, I think AI is a little alien that just appeared in your computer one day. So what's it there for, right? It's not how I would look at it, right? I wouldn't look at it through the lens of what's it there for. I would look at it through the lens of what can I do with it, So somebody smarter than me once said that the best way to think about the future, it's not as a forecasting exercise, but as a design exercise. So rather than say like, what's it for, as in like, this is happening to us, I would try and grab it and say, like, well, what can I do with this thing? I loved your example of you're using it in practice to generate images. Even if you're going to at some point replace those images, now you've got a placeholder image that makes it easier for you to consider the article concrete. Or maybe you're able to get the image that suits the article. It's a great way to get moving, to use it quickly. I'd also like to come back to your bias point. I think it was a really good way you described it. It's trained on the internet. Have you been on the internet? It's full of all kinds of stuff. People are biased, right? So AI is like a fuzzy, JPEG images are like fuzzy lines. So you can think of AI as being a little bit like a JPEG of the internet. So it's got all that stuff in it. It's a little bit fuzzier on the edges, but it's based on the internet, which is amazing and also biased. Like I tried to get one of these image models for a presentation I was doing the other day to create me a picture of a boardroom, and I couldn't get it to put a woman in the boardroom. Like I wrote a boardroom with men and women, and it was like just a bunch of guys in suits, right? And that's because if you were to search the internet for pictures of boardroom, you'll find just lots of guys, and that might even be true historically, right? That might be a fact that historically, but it's still biased.
Yeah.
It's hard to get AI to do something that's different from what it's seen. So they're crazy useful, but you got to have your guard up, and you can't trust them.
That's sorry, David.
I was going to say that one of the issues is what is AI? Because back in the 80s when turbos were invented, everything became turbocharged, and there wasn't a turbo in sight. And I think we're using the same AI model at the moment to say, oh, there's AI inside, when actually it isn't really truly AI. It's just an algorithm or it's machine learning.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure we've quite got to the true definition of what AI is.
Yeah.
I mean, John McCarthy came up with his idea in 1956, I think, of thinking machines and calling it artificial intelligence. But it was all about mimicry then.
Yeah.
And true AI is when it can create stuff itself beyond what it was originally coded to do. I don't think we're quite seeing that yet.
Yeah, no, it's a really interesting topic, and just listening to you both there, reflecting on some of the things that, and we're as a business very early on our AI journey, but we are trying to embrace it, like we're talking about, and use it and test it. And some of the things we've started to use AI for is around client and colleague engagement and communication channels, and actually just reflecting on AI that's using the internet as a source and getting perhaps bias from the quantity of stuff that's talking about whatever you're trying to research. Actually, when we're using it for colleague engagement, we've really got to think about, actually, if we've got a few very vocal people with a strong opinion on something or a strong desire to do project A or whatever it is, that doesn't actually affect the findings of the AI and some of the outputs. And I think it probably comes back to what you're saying there, David, around the common sense overlay afterwards, and to really continue to think about, does this make sense in the real world, so to speak?
But then there are applications where you can trust it pretty much implicitly in terms of language.
Yeah.
So I know that you could put down your speech. You only need to have about a minute's worth of video. And then basically it will be you speaking 50 odd different languages, and you can communicate in all those different languages to your team. And I think there you can trust that it is actually saying what you want it to say.
Yeah. Slightly off the FM topic, but actually I do wonder whether it's got an application within the broader workplace arena. That I was talking to someone the other day that owns and runs a insurance call center. And the call center does lots of different things, but primarily, surprise, surprise, about selling insurance. And they've now got an AI bot that listens into all the calls. As we know, when we call anywhere these days, it's recorded for training purposes, isn't it? But what this AI bot's doing is listening in, and perhaps I'm having a conversation with you, David, trying to sell you something, and you mentioned that you've got a dog. And if I haven't picked up on that in the moment, because I'm actually trying to sell you house insurance at the moment, the AI's listened, David's got a dog. It's actually WhatsApped me a prompt to say, when you finish talking about the home insurance, talk to David about his dog and see whether you can talk to him about the insurance for his dog. And I thought for a user case, it's a great example of how that's very helpful, isn't it? Helps me as a call agent that's perhaps incentivized around selling insurance, helps David as the customer that could then consider a different product or perhaps a new product, and of course helps the business and the economy by driving additional value through a potential transaction. And I do wonder whether that could make sense in the FM workplace, help desk, call center, request area, whatever we want to call it, and could be something that could come into our space and be really helpful.
I think it's happening at the moment.
Yeah.
I mean, it was probably Eliza was the first chatbot that was created, and that was 66.
Yeah.
Well, things have moved on. And again, that was just mimicking conversation. It would kind of repeat the question back to you rather than actually taking the conversation further.
Yeah.
But today, the AI will communicate, will understand what you're saying and be able to respond and take that conversation further. And I had an insurance policy that was online only. It couldn't speak to somebody. It was all through a chatbot. And I kept saying, can I actually speak to somebody, please? It's taking a long time to get to what I want. But I think call centers are probably one of the things where they'll all be replaced eventually.
And we know in the facilities management space, whether we're talking about an office block or a train station or an airport or all the from the weird to the wonderful assets that we get ourselves involved in, actually, it therefore becomes a very diverse world. And thinking about that help desk, whatever we want to call it, area for people to interact with, to get support, to have a request, to get some help, whatever it might be. Actually, because of the diverse nature of those assets, there's a diverse nature of users, different languages, different backgrounds, different requirements, and actually AI can definitely help with that. And we've had some really interesting early user case studies around using voice. And one of the things that I'd personally never thought about, but have learned recently, is that the further east you go in the world, and you come away from the, for want of a better description, English alphabet, actually texting and doing stuff written is much more challenging. So voice actually becomes a lot more convenient, and we found that really interesting. But something that I'm going to take away from this conversation, though, is that actually we need to make sure it's not biased. So making it really easy for one potential user group, we need to make sure that we're reflecting that into the modeling or the common sense overlay that we're putting on as well. So very interesting. So just to go to a slightly different topic then around AI, is there anything that you both think just absolutely will not happen with AI? Anything that you personally think comes to mind?
So we see the amazing AI image generation, and we see amazing AI music generation, and amazing AI written work generation. And I don't think we will ever just want to watch, listen, or, etc., something that's just made by AI. Because I don't think that's what's interesting about our creative culture. So I realized that when I was listening to the first of the really high quality AI music generation programs, they sound like professional musicians doing this stuff, and it's utterly uninteresting. Because what's interesting about art is the person, the people that made it, the point they're trying to make, the conversation they're having with the broader culture. So I don't think that the stuff is going to replace people in the way that maybe it looks like from an initial surface scan, because that's not what's interesting about people. It's not that, Purple Rain is a great song just because it's Purple Rain. It is. But it's also because of the moment in time, who Prince is or was, and all those things combined to make, iconic work iconic. So
I agree. And I kind of think that with all lyrics, you have to sell a bit of your soul to be able to get those lyrics to work. It's about your experience and what you're going through emotionally. So will it ever have a soul? Will it ever have compassion, empathy, sympathy? Will it be able to have its own feelings? I.e., will it become sentient? I don't know. I mean, I think the internet's polarized between whether AI can become a sentient being or it won't.
The problem is we don't know what these words mean. It's the same thing with you saying earlier on, like, is it intelligent? I think the problem is I don't know what intelligence means, like really. As soon as you start to define it, you start to realize that you don't really know what it means. I mean, maybe you do, I don't. So I feel the same thing with things like souls and things like that. There was the Google researcher, I don't know if you saw the story. It was early on, right at the very beginning of the large language model explosion, who was convinced that Google's AI, which was then called Bard, was sentient. And it was a big story, all the rest of it. And it's laughable looking back at that, just at how bad that language model is. But it was able to convince a really smart guy that it's sentient because whatever his instinct was as to what that means was mapped onto that device. Like, they're really good at doing all the things that you would say a sentient person in a box would do. I actually struggled to even know what those words really mean.
So originally, Alan Turing came out with the Turing test, or it was also known as the imitation game, because it was, could it fool a human being into thinking it was human? That was kind of the original test. And then if we look at intelligence and you say, well, could it join Mensa? Well, Einstein had a IQ of about 160. I think ChatGPT, version 3.5 was on that level. I think when the time 4 came out, it was 10 times that. And if that's the exponential rate that it's going to advance at, we won't understand what it's talking about.
Yeah, good point. I think listening to you both there as well, perhaps another reflection around, I like the common sense theme and that overlay, is how we will learn in the workplace, but also in our personal lives to interact with AI. A little bit like, I think, and by no means from my point of view do I think we're finished with this, but as society we're going through getting used to social media and how that makes us feel and how we react to it and what it actually means to us. And I do feel for people that have come through a generation where we've been learning that at the same time. So I think it's been quite tough. I like to think with small young children that we're going to have learned a lot more by the time my children, for example, are using it. And I think they will be better off for that. And perhaps we're going to go through the same thing with AI.
I hope we don't allow children to use it until they're about 16.
Yeah.
Maybe 16 is a bit too late.
They're already using it.
I know. Well, that's what I mean. But we should be back. Well, Australia's already put in a plan to ban social media until you reach 16. I mean, I think my kids, they just lied and put, they were 12 when they first started using it and just said, oh, this is my date of birth. And that was that.
And I think that's probably your kids along with half of the rest of the world, I think. So it's an interesting one. And I think for me, the social media piece, there's been a lot of research, hasn't there, and science behind when someone likes something we're doing or saying that the satisfaction it gives us. I think we need to be quite careful with AI around that as well, because I'm sure there'll be some real themes to draw upon from there. And I was talking to someone the other day about voice, for example. So if you're having a discussion with AI, by having the discussion, you feel more satisfied that you've had a discussion with someone, even though it's not someone, than you do if you've written an email. So perhaps you've got some feedback, whether it's good, bad, or indifferent. If you've sent an email, you feel less satisfied than you do if you've had a conversation with a computer. And perhaps you feel even more satisfied, to your point, David, earlier around the insurance thing, that once you've spoken to someone, you feel a bit safer again. I think we've probably got all of that to get used to, and I'm sure there's a big part of that in the workplace as well, as we continually adjust to what AI is going to be useful for.
And I think with communication, if it's in text, it's a one channel. It can be interpreted. If it's vocalized, you've got intonation behind it. As my wife says to me, it's not what you say, it's the way you say it. And so it's the tone. And so I think it's got to pick up on all those nuances before we get it completely right.
Yeah.
Which the best models can.
Yeah.
That's not typically the ones you're using when you use the tools, but they can do that. And they're probably as able to do that as any one of us would be able to do. So all of these things are coming to the workplace near you,
Oh, I agree. And I think that what if we say mid-50s was the start, there was an AI winter between the 70s and the late 70s and early 90s where expectations didn't really meet what we thought was going to happen. But you look at the last 5 years and then you look at the next 5 years, boy, is there going to be such a transformation in that period.
So on that note, Dave, because I think that segues into something that we haven't discussed yet, and we've talked about how we as individuals, whether we're talking about in the workplace or in our just general lives, might prepare or start to use AI and embrace it. From a workplace point of view, if we've got workplace leaders listening into this podcast, which we hopefully do, have we got any early ideas or thoughts or anything we've seen out on our travels that are advice to leaders around how they can encourage organizations and colleagues to get ready to embrace AI in the workplace, ultimately to avoid negative situations around data mishaps or people being concerned about something they don't need to be concerned about? Either of you come across any practical advice for listeners?
I mean, there's lots of organizations have started trying to figure out principles to guide people in the organization. What I like about principles, as opposed to just governance being like all your rules and like stuff like this, principles are about the why. They're about the sort of motivation behind your stance. So you can create a policy in a company that says, go to no use ChatGPT, right? And somebody will get in trouble if they use ChatGPT. But if you create principles that like people can understand about why it is, and in fact, specifically what is bad about it, and it's not bad to use ChatGPT. These things are amazing, right? What would be bad is if you put personal data of a customer in, and not only are you potentially sending that data outside the UK, it could potentially be used to train a future version of ChatGPT and so on and so forth. So I feel like principles are a good starting point for companies trying to figure out what is it you care about, why is it you feel the way you feel, and trying to take your staff on a journey with you so that you don't need to police everybody all the time. Like they're kind of empowered and they know what good looks like. I think that's something like that, maybe where I would start.
And perhaps trying to be open and creating that safe space around the please do not do, because it will create a negative situation, but also be comfortable to explore and have that discussion.
There was a story in BBC just a few days ago, as of time of recording, about staff just doing what they like with these tools, despite it maybe being against policy. So this sort of shadow IT thing, but with AI specifically. And I think I haven't seen tools as appealing to individual people across massive sectors and different industries since the internet. When the internet first appeared in your office, there was like very punitive stances of don't surf the web, just use your computer for work, and people kind of did anyway. And now we still have like policies around that, but it's really around like don't take the mickey, it's fine if you need to buy something for somebody off Amazon, just get your job done kind of stance, right? I feel like AI is a bit like that too.
I've always had the general rule of thumb, and I don't know whether either of you got a view on this, but you wouldn't put anything into AI that you wouldn't be happy to stand up on the BBC News and broadcast to the world, because my understanding is that if you've said something to AI, someone else can query it back out if they ask the right question. Is that correct?
It's not strictly speaking it's not as simple as that, right? It is, depending which version of these products you're using. So if, for example, you're using ChatGPT and you don't pay for it and you just use it on the website, they will save that message and they will train their AI on your message. It's extremely unlikely. In fact, it's basically not going to happen that the data you send in will come back out. But that doesn't mean that you're allowed to send that data, and it doesn't mean that you're not technically giving that data to another company. If you pay for the products, though, you have the option to click a button that says, don't use my data for these things.
And David, you obviously have the benefit of having a broad spectrum across our facilities management and workplace space. And as you quite rightly said earlier, a big part of the industry is tendering, whether that's a service provider tendering for to win a piece of business or a customer wanting to tender out a piece of business. Have you heard anything or any concerns when you've been out talking to people around someone's overused it for a tender and actually the competition have been able to get their greatest bit of innovation from asking what did supplier X say about something? Or
no, I'm not specifically in FM, but if you look at OpenAI and their lawsuits that are coming to DeepSeek because they feel that they've used their systems to train DeepSeek.
Yeah. Yeah, very interesting.
The technical term I think is called distillation, okay. Or it's more commonly known as copying, or plagiarism. I think that within FM we always talk about it's been a great industry for innovation and sharing, And I think that's because so many people have moved across from one company to another that information has already gone with them. So I think that all the companies have benefited from their BD teams going from one organization to another and taking information with them or taking ideas with them. I don't think AI is going to be any different. I think with any transformative journey, and 70% of all transformations fail, it's down to the lack of communication. It's not around the technology that isn't working. It's just the way that the humans have been told about it and communicated and warmed up to it.
Yeah, and that's why those sort of guiding principles around using the tools, creating that safe space could perhaps be a really big takeaway for anyone thinking about putting AI into the workplace from today.
There's the old message that you only have one opportunity. You get one chance to make it work, because once it's failed once, everyone's a disbeliever and they won't believe it's going to work for them or do anything for them. So you've got to make sure it's right the first time.
Also, there's ways for you to make these tools available to staff in a way that can help build your confidence in a company. So you can make chatbots available to staff in a way that you are able to keep the logs.
Yeah.
And then you can audit the logs to make sure people aren't accidentally sending, the crown jewels away to some server overseas. And if they are, you can correct that behavior. So there's ways to do it that, will build confidence in the organization and help people build a mental model around what it's good and bad at. I think these tools look like they're easy to use because you can put something in and get something great out, but they've got all these hard edges. It's kind of hard to get your head around why they can do PhD level mathematics and can't understand that 9.11 is smaller than 9.9. And that's a real example, right? And if you ask, most of the chatbots will fail that. And we don't exactly know the reason behind it. There's a paper where people actually tried to figure out by looking inside the neurons in the AI why it was happening, and their conclusion was that it's because there's a lot of stuff in the Bible with that kind of 9 dot whatever on it, and in the Bible 9.11 is higher than 9.9, because so if you ask that question, the Bible part of the AI gets lit up. Now that might not be the definitive answer, but that's such a strange thing, such an alien concept, right? So easy for us, so hard for an AI.
Yeah, and that's why that bias awareness piece comes out, because perhaps there's lots of copies of the Bible available online. I'm sure there is, but also that common sense factor around, does this make sense? Because when you sit down and think, is 9.1 bigger than 9.9, then we know the answer, don't we? So yeah, really interesting. So as this is the first episode in our vodcast series, wanted to mix the formats up a little bit so we can see what works, and wanted to go for a quick fire round, myth or reality. So I'm going to ask you a few quick questions, and I'd like to get your immediate views on whether you think it's a myth or whether you think it could become reality. So the first one is, do you think AI will enhance the human factors in the workplace?
Reality.
And that's a strong consensus, and I would agree. So the second question, do you think companies that are perhaps thinking they don't need to enhance or embrace AI right now in 2025 will be irrelevant in 5 years' time?
More of a reality. However, I think they'll be commercially encumbered if they don't.
Yeah, likewise, reality.
Yeah, brilliant. I tend to agree, and I think probably the further we make that 10 years' time or 15 years' time, it's going to get even stronger, isn't it, that answer? But I guess we'll find out, won't we? So last question around AI. Do you think AI will replace more jobs in the workforce than it will create?
Myth.
Yeah, myth.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I think, as we've discussed today, it's probably something that's going to make us all even better. So to wrap up, thank you both for your time today. We're going to finish on one final question. If you had to pick one thing that AI was going to do to enhance the workplace operationally, what would you really hang your AI hat on?
2 words: workplace wellbeing. It should be there to support people and make them enjoy being at work and more productive at work and give them a better positive experience.
Yeah, love that. Thank you, David.
I'd like people to get the feeling when they use it that I get when I use it. So obviously I'm into this, so I'm not representative of a normal person doing a normal job, because this is my job. But when I'm using these tools, I'm powerful. I'm able to do more things better, faster. I can do different things. So it makes me feel like I've cloned myself 3 times, and it's a really nice feeling. I hope that people get to feel like AI is helping them do whatever they want to do. It's a really nice feeling.
I think actually in some ways similar answer, because actually how you feel is a massive thing around your well-being, and quite clearly there's a huge positive impact that AI can play in that space. But of course, we should all be mindful that there could be a negative impact as well. And I think that's why that engagement, thinking, embracing, trying is probably one of the key takeaways that I've certainly taken from today. So thank you again, both. It's been great having this discussion. And as I think we've said a few times throughout this vodcast, we could probably talk all day about AI, and hopefully there's much more to come on it in the future.
Thank you.
Yeah, pleasure. Thank you.